I sat in the hospital room, overwhelmed with frustration. I still couldn't understand why I had been transferred to this remote, underdeveloped area. Until now, I had been working at a major civil hospital in Lahore. And now I'd been suddenly posted to this tiny town with the vague instruction: no doctor seems to stay there for long. Go and find out what the problem is. It was almost 11 a.m., and I'd been sitting idle since morning. Not a single patient had come in. The only company I had was a nurse who remained seated beside me. I turned to her and asked, "Doesn't anyone even come here?" She chuckled and replied, "Once in a while, someone shows up." We were in the middle of our conversation when a petite woman in a full burqa walked in, carrying a baby in her lap. She sat in front of me, and the moment she lifted her veil, my eyes widened in shock. The woman I had assumed to be an adult was actually a 9 or 10-year-old girl, and she had a 4 or 5-month-old baby in her arms. She gently placed the baby in front of me and said, "I don't know what's wrong with him. He just won't stop crying. I brought him here to be checked." I took the baby from her arms and asked softly, "What's his name? Who is he to you?" She replied, "His name is Abdullah. He's 3 months old. And my name is Shamim. I'm his mother." Her words left me stunned. I looked at her in disbelief. By my estimate, she couldn't have been more than 10 years old. How could she possibly be this child's mother? I asked again, "Who is this baby to you?" I thought perhaps there was a language barrier, or maybe she had misunderstood me, considering this was a Pashtun area. That would also explain why there wasn't a proper hospital here and why people didn't often seek medical help. But she replied again, this time clearly and confidently, "Dr. Sahiba, I told you, he is my son. His name is Abdullah." Hesitantly, I asked, "How old are you?" She smiled and answered, 9 years. At that moment, I completely forgot about the sick baby in my arms. I couldn't take my eyes off this little girl named Shamim, who had just told me she was a mother. I looked at her and asked, "How is it even possible for you to have a child at this age? Who arranged your marriage? Do you even know that this is illegal? Child marriage is a crime. And becoming a mother at such a young age, do you realize the consequences?" Before Shamim could answer, the nurse standing beside me interjected, "Dr. Sahiba, she has 3 more kids. She's the mother of 4 children." This time, it felt like the sky had collapsed on my head. A 9-year-old girl and already a mother of 4? In a burst of anger, I said, "Go call your husband. I want to speak with him first." She lowered her eyes and said calmly, "Dr. Sahiba, my husband doesn't live here. Whatever you have to say it to me. These are my children. I take care of them myself." Her words made no sense to me. Surely someone must have come with you, your parents, in-laws, someone. There has to be an adult I can speak to. This is inhumane. Forcing a child into marriage and making her bear children. This is abuse. Shamim looked at me strangely and said firmly, "Dr. Sahiba, if you want to give medicine to Abdullah, fine. Otherwise, I'll go to the local herbal healer. This is why people don't come to you city doctors. You interfere in our personal lives instead of doing your job. Why do you care how old I am or how many children I have? I told you, these children are mine. If I don't have a problem, why are you so concerned? Either treat my child or give him back. I'll take him to the village hakama." I stared at this 9-year-old girl whose tongue was sharper than many adults I had met. She had more confidence in her words than the teenage girls I had seen in the city, and despite myself, I was left speechless. Reluctantly, I wrote a prescription. The baby, Abdullah, only had a mild fever. Shamim took the paper, lifted her baby into her lap, dropped her veil back down, and walked away with swift, confident steps. As soon as Shamim left, I turned to the nurse and asked, "What is going on here? Do things like this actually happen in this region? Are girls really married off this young among the Pashtuns?" The nurse looked at me and calmly said, "Dr. Sahiba, it's best if you don't get involved in such matters. Shamim is well known in this entire area. Everyone knows she has 4 children, but no one has ever seen her husband. No one even knows how she got pregnant." Her words replaced my anger with a surge of curiosity. What kind of girl is she, I wondered, whose husband no one has ever seen, and who has given birth to 4 children at such a young age? It wasn't a normal thing. Girls at that age are just stepping into adolescence, or are still far from it. And yet, she was already a mother of 4. Physiologically, this was an anomaly. I asked the nurse, "Have you ever tried to find out who the father of these children is? Where is he?" The nurse shook her head quickly. "God forbid! Why would I go digging into Shamim's affairs? Her mother is even more rude and foul-tempered than she is. If she finds out we're asking questions, she'll defame us in front of the whole community." She leaned in closer and added in a lower tone, "These people are under the protection of the local tribal chief. That's why everyone here keeps their distance from them. I'd advise you the same. Stay away from them and just do your job. Otherwise, you could be transferred out of here just like the others. These people have power, Dr. Sahiba. As long as you sit quietly and don't meddle, you'll be fine. This hospital is almost always empty anyway. That's why doctors get bored of the silence and leave." I had ignored most of what she said, but one particular line stayed with me, the part about the tribal chief being supportive of these people. I asked, "Is the tribal chief related to them? Is that why he protects them?" The nurse shook her head. "No, even we don't know the real reason. But for whatever reason, he backs them, and that's why they act like they own this place." Her words left me quiet, but my mind was in turmoil. I had seen countless cases and strange conditions during my medical career, but never before had I seen a 9-year-old girl who was already a mother of 4. When my shift ended, I left the hospital and headed toward the government quarters that had been assigned to me. They were located a little distance away. As I walked through the winding streets, glancing around aimlessly, my eyes suddenly caught sight of Shamim again. She was still wearing her burqa, but the veil was lifted. She was in the middle of a heated argument with another child in the street, and the intensity of the fight left me speechless. Despite myself, I stopped and stood quietly, trying to understand what was happening. She had spoken to me earlier in reasonably good Urdu, but now she was yelling in her native Pashto, and I couldn't understand a word. All I could gather was that the other child had likely done something to one of her children, and she was reacting fiercely in defense. The moment she noticed me watching, she quickly dropped her veil and stopped the fight. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I turned to the boy she had been arguing with and asked, "What happened?" But he didn't understand Urdu either. He simply shrugged his shoulders. Left with no answers, I continued walking to the quarters, but Shamim's image was now carved into my mind, a 9-year-old with the presence and temperament of a grown woman. The way she fought reflected a deep, protective instinct for her children. But then again, she herself was still a child. The thought echoed in my mind again and again. How could she have given birth at such a young age? I couldn't make sense of this place. People here seemed to trust the local traditional healer more than a qualified doctor. That's probably why the hospital remained deserted. Perhaps Shamim had turned to me only because her child hadn't improved under the old healer's care. And then, the next day, Shamim came to the hospital again. This time, she had another child in her lap. This one around a 1.5 years old. She walked up to me confidently and said, "Dr. Sahiba, your medicine helped. Abdullah is better now, but now do something for my Abdul Bari." The 1.5-year-old boy was just like Abdullah, chubby and seemingly healthy. But when I placed my hand on his forehead, I realized he too was burning with fever. I looked at Shamim and asked, "What exactly are you doing that all your children keep falling ill?" She burst into laughter and replied lightheartedly, "My kids love eating ice. I love it too, so we all eat it all the time. That's why we're always sick. Even the village healer has given up on us. The moment she sees us coming, she refuses to give us any medicine." Hearing that, I felt a wave of frustration rise inside me. The weather was quite severe. Eating ice in such conditions was like inviting illness. But then I reminded myself, Shamim was just a child herself. How could she be expected to understand what was best for her children? I explained it to her firmly. Thankfully, she seemed to understand. "All right, Dr. Sahiba," she said. "I'll be more careful from now on." She took the prescription, lifted her baby in her arms, and left once again. I turned to the nurse and said, "I want to know who the father of these children is. Who has done this to this innocent girl?" She should be out playing, not burdened with the responsibility of 4 children. She doesn't even know that feeding ice to such small kids is dangerous. They're suffering from chest infections now. If not treated properly, this could get worse. Of course, I didn't tell all this to Shamim. She might have panicked. Once again, the nurse gave me that same warning. Dr. Sahiba, please don't get involved in this girl's business. She is not what she seems. Many people have tried to dig into her story, and every one of them failed. You won't get anywhere. Just focus on your job. There was a strange fear in the nurse's eyes. One I could sense clearly. I didn't understand what she was so afraid of. I wasn't asking anything outlandish. All I wanted to know was, how did this child become a mother? I made up my mind. I was going to find out the truth about Shamim, no matter what. At the end of my shift, instead of heading back to my government quarters, I decided to ask around about Shamim's house. Some people didn't understand my language, while others, once they did, gave vague gestures and directions, their faces filled with confusion and unease. It was clear they were surprised that I was even asking about her. Maybe everyone in this area kept their distance from Shamim. About 10 minutes later, I found myself in front of a small wooden door. I knocked. Shamim opened it herself, and her eyes widened in surprise when she saw me standing there. She hesitated, but then invited me inside and even offered me a chair to sit on. In the courtyard, all 4 children were playing. The oldest looked about 4 years old. That meant Shamim must have been only 6 when he was born. That was impossible. No 6-year-old can biologically give birth. I glanced at her and asked directly, "Whose children are these? Where are their parents? Because I'm quite sure now that they're not yours." Shamim gave me a strange look and said stubbornly, "They're mine. Why don't you believe me?" She remained unshaken, confidently repeating her claim. I pressed further. "Fine, then call their father. I want to meet him." Before she could respond, her mother came out of the inner room and said coldly, "Dr. Sahiba, why are you so interested in our lives?" "Haven't we already told you? Shamim's husband isn't here. These are her children, and her husband works somewhere else." I quickly asked, "When will he return?" She replied without blinking, 1 year, 2, 3. We don't know when he'll be back." The expression on Shamim's mother's face said it all. She was lying, just like her daughter. But if they were both lying, then whose children were these? What game were this mother and daughter playing? Why did the entire village fear them? And why did the tribal chief support them so openly? These were questions I now felt compelled to answer. I had a deepening feeling that something was seriously wrong, something being carefully hidden. The way Shamim's mother carried herself made it impossible for me to stay there any longer. I quietly stepped outside, unsure of whom to even ask or who could possibly give me an honest answer. And then a thought crossed my mind, the tribal chief. I knew approaching him would be like willingly walking into fire, but I had made up my mind. I turned in the direction of the chief's havali. A servant ushered me into the guest lounge. Shortly after, the tribal chief arrived. I stood up respectfully as he entered. He greeted me with warmth and a kind smile. "Very few doctors stay here long," he said. "People hardly ever go to the hospital, and that's why most doctors get frustrated and leave." He was incredibly hospitable and spoke with polished manners. For a while, we exchanged polite conversation about the locals, but eventually I gently brought up Shamim. "What relation is Shamim to you?" I asked, as casually as I could. His face instantly changed. "Is everything all right, Dr. Sahiba? What made you think of Shamim?" he asked, his voice measured. I smiled to soften the moment. "I just heard that you take good care of her and her children. That's why I asked." He smiled faintly and replied, "Well, her mother works in my household as a servant. That's the only reason I look after them. Shamim's husband isn't here, and she has 4 small children. Someone has to look after them. I'm the leader of this region. It's my responsibility." I looked at him closely. He seemed like a well-educated, intelligent man. "Doesn't it strike you as odd," I asked, "that such a young girl has 4 children? It's medically impossible for someone that age to give birth to even 1 child, let alone 4. And yet here she is, mother to 4 healthy boys. Where is the father? What does he do?" The chief tried to change the subject at first, dodging the question, but he must have realized I wasn't going to let it go. I was there because of that question, and he knew it. Finally, he said, Dr. Sahiba, what happens is the will of God. We humans have no control over such things. That's just her fate. Some people yearn for children for years and are never blessed. And Shamim, look at her. She's already a mother of 4 healthy boys. I don't know why, but something about his words felt off. I replied, You're right that children are a blessing, but this isn't a blessing, it's a tragedy. She never went to school. She's never even seen life. She doesn't understand health or motherhood. She's barely more than a child herself, and yet she bears the responsibility of 4 more. It doesn't add up. These children must belong to someone else. And I will find out the truth. Because legally speaking, child marriage is a crime. His face paled. There's no need for police and court drama, Dr. Sahiba, he said sharply. I'm the authority here. All decisions are made by me. If you have a concern, bring it to me directly. I nodded and calmly replied, Then tell me the truth. How did Shamim end up with 4 children at such a young age? I won't go public with anything. I'm a doctor, yes, but I also conduct investigations and research. Shamim's case is medically unique. If she truly gave birth at such a young age, the world needs to know. I'd take her to the city for proper tests, genetic, physiological, everything, so we can determine if such a thing is even scientifically possible. The chief lowered his head. Dr. Sahiba, he said slowly, you're not like the others who came before you. I ran all of them out of this village because they started digging into Shamim's life and became my enemies. But you're a decent woman. And more importantly, you're a woman. We Pashtuns are bound by honor to protect our women. He looked up at me with a deep, weary gaze. I will answer your questions. All of them. But what I tell you must remain strictly between us, because that would be in the best interest of Shamim and her children. I immediately promised him that I wouldn't share anything with anyone. I told him the truth, that I only wanted to satisfy my inner curiosity. What was happening simply didn't seem medically or logically possible, and that's why I needed to know the truth. Upon hearing this, the tribal chief revealed something that completely stunned me. He began, On the other side of our region, there's another settlement, one inhabited by a different Pashtun tribe. We've had a long-standing enmity with them. Those people, with clever planning, trapped my daughter. They made her fall in love with one of their boys and lured her away. In her madness for love, she forgot our blood feud and ran away to be with them. They purposely arranged her marriage with that boy. I had no idea any of this was happening. I searched for her like a madman. Only one person knew the truth. Shamim's mother. She was a close servant of my daughter. She helped me a lot, but even with her help, I couldn't find my child. And then 5 years later, my daughter somehow managed to escape from those people and return home. She came back with 4 sons. She told me how she had been tricked in the name of love, forced into marriage, and then abused terribly. She was covered in emotional and physical wounds, a broken soul, and a mother of 4. I gave her shelter and started her treatment. But those 4 boys became a problem. Hiding my daughter's disappearance had been easy, but hiding 4 children in a place where villagers came in and out of my Haveli was impossible. If I told anyone that those boys were my daughters and that she had run off to our enemies, the people here would never forgive her. Worse, they would demand I punish her with death to restore the tribe's honor, and I couldn't bear that. So I turned to Shamim's mother and begged her to take the children in and raise them. If my daughter had been mentally and physically stable, I would have sent her away to the city with the children. But the condition she returned in, there was no way I could let her go. So when I asked Shamim's mother for help, she hesitated at first, worried about the villagers' questions. But then she came up with a plan. The children would be passed off as Shamim's own. Everyone already believed Shamim spent most of her time in my Haveli. So I made up the story that I had married her off to one of my workers who had since moved to the city for work. I claimed the children were born here, in this very Haveli, and were his. No one had the courage to question me. The story ended right there. Everyone just accepted that Shamim was the mother. What Shamim's mother did for me, keeping this secret, is a debt I will never be able to repay. And Shamim? She has raised these boys in her arms like they were truly her own. When the time is right, he continued, I'll arrange a good marriage for Shamim. I'll bring the children back to the Haveli to be raised under my roof. But for now, it's not possible. Tears had welled up in the tribal chief's eyes. He looked like a man torn apart, not by politics, but by fatherhood. Yes, the tribal feuds still existed, but a father's love had risen above all of it. I quietly looked at him, nodded, and stood up. I promised him I would never tell anyone, and I meant it. As I stepped out of the Haveli, I saw Shamim entering with all 4 boys gathered in her arms. She was bringing them to visit their real mother. My heart swelled with an emotion I couldn't name. Shamim, this young girl who had remained utterly loyal to her master, who had protected his secret with unwavering faith. Now it's been almost a year since I started working in this remote hospital. And in that year, I've watched Shamim closely. She isn't just a girl pretending to be a mother. She is a mother. She loves those children with a tenderness beyond her age. She tends to their fevers, wipes their tears, and feeds them with care more fierce than I've seen in many biological mothers. She protects them, not just out of duty, but with heart and soul. And perhaps that is the truest form of humanity.